Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Junia Doan's The Spark. I'm Junia Doan. Thank you for joining us. Today I'm with Carl Sabatino, on-air host and producer of national radio and television syndication program Smith Sabatino. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I was wondering, with this long, distinguished career in radio and television, how you came to it. After all, you have a degree in management industrial relations.
Yes. My father was an artist. Artists didn't make much money in the 50s, and he introduced me through my uncle to Jackie Gleason. And I was Jackie Gleason's best boy on the dynamic Honeymoon series in 1955 and 56. And Jackie said, I'm going to quote him now, "You're a natural kid, you got to do this." And I was 9 years old. And from there, I've been in the business ever since. And that is now plus 60 years.
Well, then how does that explain the degree in management industrial relations?
Because my daddy always said, you want to have more than one thing when you're in the broadcast business. He was an artist who wound up working in the post office, in the electronics division at the GPO. Yes. Because though he remained an artist and a friend of Walt Disney, as a matter of fact, he said, you have to have backup. So college one, and I came out of college. I went into college straight out of Vietnam as a veteran, and that's what helped pay my way through NYU. And then I went back to work for Jackie for 2 years.
Doing what?
He was doing his movies, and I did some consulting work for him. Took care of the things he needed to get
arrangements.
Done. He had a far-flung empire, including golf courses and
really?
endorsements and gosh knows what. And I got involved in that for a couple of years before I got into the advertising and then the broadcast business.
How did you get into broadcasting?
An old dear friend of mine, Hanno Fuchs, used to be at Hawaii.
Yes.
Hanno said, why don't you come join Schiffman, Ferguson, Stone on the Avenue, which is a small ad agency. Start there, and when things develop, we'll bring you along. So from that particular point, I began getting involved in the eclectic end of the business.
Which means?
That means I became a journalist for the New York Post. Gene Kabner got me the job as I was a drama and television critic, basically. And I worked all the shows from 1979 to 1982. And one of the reviews I did, Ted Turner saw the review, liked it, and hired me on to go to work at CNN down in Atlanta, Georgia. And then my career from there launched. It launched from that point.
How did you have the courage to write reviews?
Well,
my
aunt started in the business, my two aunts.
Yeah.
Who first investment was Manna La Mancha, which was done on Myrtle Street in Greenwich Village in a tent. And they were the initial investors, along with 5 or 6 others, to get Manna La Mancha on Broadway, and they did. And so with that experience, I learned how it worked.
Yes.
But I knew that the business was an eclectic mix of who's in television, who's on Broadway, who's singing, who's acting, who's dancing. And so I saw this panacea of different elements in the business that you can be a part of. And so I became part of all of that. A writer, a producer. I did a little bit of acting. Just walk-ons, recurrent roles, that kind of thing in early television, just to make a buck. They paid you $125. It was nice. You walked on, you smiled, you walked off.
Yeah, easy.
But you got paid for the day. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things, and I saw the eclectic mix of the business. Its base was writing, and then producing, and then getting the show on the air. And I met an old dear friend in the 80s who's now passed. His name is Stan Moger. And I've always had a great love for Christmas. And so did Stanley. Even as a Jewish man, he loved the Christmas holiday season. And he started a thing called the SFM Holiday Network. And I had, back in 1970-71, when John Corcoran was running WPIX, we called it Four Drunks in a Bar. Hanno Fuchs was one of them, Joe Cifarelli, John Corcoran, and I. And John said, as vice president of news of the station, I do not want to run on Christmas Eve stories about fires and stories about who robbed what bank. I don't want to do it, so what do I do? We all came together with the idea of doing Christmas music, but against what? John Corcoran says, I have out in Chicago at WGN, which is owned by the same company, the original Gracie Mansion done by film, Yule log. It's been sitting out there for years. It was done during the war. Don't know why. It's just sitting there. Why don't we run the Yule log and we'll run music and then some commercials every hour or so on. That started the Yule log craze, which is now on every station at every Christmas Eve to avoid running news and all the bad things, unfortunately, that go on in the world at that time. It's a holiday time. And so that started the Yule log. So from there, I continued that by doing the radio portion of that. I'm now into my 38th year.
So a lot of people gave you a lot of breaks. You must have an engaging personality or work hard. What qualities did you bring to those early years that they saw?
Some people say I don't know when to shut up. I always found the interest in the business. I always found the next step. There's always something more to do. When I met Dick Clark, he had just come off of doing the bandstand and was now generating the empire that he finally built. And he said, Carl, the one thing is tomorrow. You do it today, and once you do it, it's done. You move on. They want to know what you've done next. And I found that to be part of the business. So I was always looking at new ideas, new people, new thoughts, new Broadway shows, and so on and so forth. It just generated the kind of interest that made it exciting. Because it's an exciting business that we're in.
And you were able to cross-reference, too.
Yes,
because
of course.
Because
I had that kind of background. And I became as much of a producer. My love was always writing, but I wasn't very good at it, quite frankly. And I knew I wasn't, but I like people who tell me that.
Yes.
It's okay, but really, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But the ideas were there. And so we did some interesting things. I remember Phil Donahue, I worked with Joe Cifarelli to produce his show. And Phil Donahue, a very smart man, good writer, by the way. He always said the next idea is the only idea that you get on the table that gets produced. The rest you can, and you move on. And that's exactly how our business is. It's what you do next. What's happening tomorrow? What do you have planned? And that's always been my motto in the business. And
You think that's your gift?
I think a lot of us have it. I've just been fortunate enough to meet with the right people, to engage with the right people, and to stand in line, because it's a business of waiting.
What do you mean?
Like the cattle calls. I know so many young gals and guys who are still doing it to this day. It's called the cattle call. They stand in line, they wait outside, they get their chance, they get their 3 minutes on the stage, and so on. Well, our business is the same way. It's a series of cattle calls. You have an idea, you present it to someone, you stand in line. And they move you up, and when you get your chance, make sure you don't blow it when you get there. Make sure you're right on with your idea. You're going to get 5 minutes, pitch it, put all the pieces together, and hopefully it'll go. And that's what our business is about. And I remember Stan Moger, God rest his soul, always said, you got 5, he always used to say this to me in the beginning, Carl, you got 5 minutes.
Right.
You got 5 minutes. If you can sell me in 5, let's go do it.
So when you started, it was radio, television. Now we're morphing into more ways to get information. How have you adjusted your ideas?
You look at the internet, you look at the digital business podcasts, you look at a way that the industry has changed, but it really hasn't changed that much. There's just more different kinds of mediums to present a video, to present a show. That's the technical aspects of it. I've always stayed on the side where if you don't have a good concept, and if it's not well written, I don't care what medium you put it in. It's just it's not going to work. And I remember just recently, Last Man Standing was taken off of ABC television. One of the writers for the show called me and said, Carl, we're looking to place this somewhere. And eventually it wound up back on Fox. And I said to him, if you're going to be on Fox, you're going to have to write a different show because it won't work for that audience. That was my only advice to him, but it seemed to work.
Right.
Because you're going into a different audience. You're on a different network now. You're not on ABC. You're going into Fox with a different demographic. See, it gets back to that's where you asked in the beginning about management industrial relations.
Right.
Well, I spent a good deal of my time in research, using the research background in demographics and dealing with audiences and their household incomes and what they like and what they don't like. That's what our business is about. It's not just having a good idea, it's how you get it on the air and to whom, you see. And that's what keeps it on the air. Some movies make it for that reason and some don't. Some of the better movies that have come out, they cost very little, relatively a small amount of money, but they were well planned, like Green Book is an example and others. Well written, well directed, good concepts, right place, right time. And that's all marketing, you see. It's the placement of the show.
And knowing the culture.
Absolutely. It's all part of it. But that's all part of the demographic work that you do, the marketing work that you do when you have a concept that someone presents to you. We're working on a show now targeted to an older audience called 98.6.
Oh.
Lovely idea. It was presented to me by Ellen Evans and Roland Smith, my associate, and Bill Boggs. Bill Boggs has been around for a long time, about the idea of presenting a talk show dealing with medical issues and other advice to a 60-plus audience. I like the idea. And so do the investors, and so does Amazon. But that's been 4 years in the making. It's taken us 4 years to get to that point. And we go in pre-production.
Your father was right. You need a revenue stream when you start out.
Absolutely.
Because the waiting time is extensive.
And it's 4 years, and now in 2 months we go into pre-production. But that's the nature of our business. That's what makes our business work. And sometimes you may wait a long time, and it never sells.
Do people, break down demographically whether they listen to radio or television or different, they look for different things from radio and television?
Radio, the survival of radio today is cars, because most people watch television or listen to podcasts. Radio in California is still enormous. I've just come back from California a couple of weeks ago, and everyone listens to radio in cars because everyone's in a car in California for at least 3 or 4 hours a day. Going one place or another, they're in a car. And radio is still king because you still can't watch something and drive at the same time. Or you might listen to a podcast through Bluetooth or something like that, but radio is still king. It's the audio portion. I still love radio because I love the sense of conversation just like you and I are having, you see.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily require a video medium to translate your idea. Radio is an opportunity when you take the camera out of a room. It's just two people talking with a microphone in front of you. And I've always loved the simplicity of that idea.
And it's also, you feel connected some way.
You do, because you're in conversation.
And conversation connects?
It does connect, and it connects in a different kind of way, because when cameras are present in a room, you can feel the difference. You can feel the change in the person. Normally when I do an interview, I prefer radio.
Right.
Because radio just allows us to have that conversation without the third party present. You see, the voyeur camera.
I noticed when I was on your program, it's like, okay, you know.
And the cameras in that studio are beautifully placed. They're placed away from the center, and they're stand-up cameras without what we call movable cameras.
Yeah.
And you don't even know they're there. And it's just a conversation, you see. And most people are more comfortable in that kind of environment without that third party.
Do you have to prepare differently?
You do. Because you if you are not in line with camera angles, okay, the show looks awkward. So you have to keep that in mind. You can't move or adjust or swing around. In radio, when you don't have cameras in the room, literally there's a much more comfortable environment. You can drink a cup of coffee. You can do certain things that are not visible to the eye, but they would be if you have a camera in the room.
Yeah.
And it changes the makeup of the conversation too.
How have you noticed that? In what way?
The makeup is because people are self-conscious. They're always worried about that person looking at them, which is the camera, and how they're going to look.
Yes.
And that is a natural thing. Most people are self-conscious when we want to take a picture. You see, the selfies. You see.
Right.
Well, people get self-conscious about that when there's no camera present. It's just you and I talking in a room. We are not paying attention to the cameras that are here today. I'm not, because I've been doing this
I know.
for many, many years, you see.
Right.
But normally people would be very self-conscious. The normal person would.
Yes. Not like an experience.
Correct. And that's one of the reasons why in the news business, they've asked the camera people to back up. Normally they would have been right in front of you, right next to the person asking the question. Now they stand further back. They move further back away from the conversation, because they can do that today with what they call a longer lens that keeps the two people on camera, but it's not right in your face.
Right.
Because that camera's right there and it makes people terribly self-conscious.
Right.
Terribly
Tighten up.
self-conscious, yes.
Now, you have another big interest, and that's in the field of education. You know,
Yes.
the Board of Education out where you live.
Yes.
What are some of the issues you're trying to resolve out there?
I'm doing a program called 7 Degrees of Success, which is now going around to the New Jersey high schools and basically trying to encapsulate 12 years of public education. We can't change that. Well, what we can do is give them 7 points, things that they should be paying attention to, like be inquisitive in your career, be aware of things, pay attention, be conversational. We try to take that 12-year learning, and we can't change that, but we can give them preparation for college, and for the seniors in college, preparation for the workplace.
What did you mean by being conversational?
Because when they come in front of me, and I do, over the course of a month, I may do 10 or 12 interviews for our own company or for other people. Young people today have a great deal of difficulty communicating that terrible question, tell me about yourself.
Right.
It's a terrible question, I grant that. I'm trying to extract from you who you are and do you know about our business, and tell me about what you know. Conversation and tone has been lost over the years. They can't communicate their thoughts. And when we did this at a school and I won't name the school, in a very well-placed school in New Jersey, out of the 28 young people that were in the class, young adults that were in the class, 17 wrote me a note, comments. And they basically said, I've never heard anyone talk to me like that before. I get it now, but I wish I had you when I was a freshman in high school.
Yes.
I know now, and you read between the lines, I don't know a lot of things that I should know. And I'm just telling them to be prepared for what you have to know. To be prepared, is it very simple? Never be late. Never, ever, ever, never, and I go through this never, ever, never, and I go down the list. Never, ever, never, ever, ever, never, ever, ever, never, never, ever, ever, ever be late under any circumstances, if you can avoid it. Always be on time. When you're sitting in that classroom before that professor arrives, and I'm an adjunct professor, so I know, that smiling face, ready to work, ready to listen, makes a big difference. And by the way, every now and then, ask a question. Be inquisitive. Ask a question, you see. Know about things. Go beyond what they've just given you to read. Explore further in your text. You've got the computer in front of you. It's easy, you see. And I'll ask simple questions to them, and I found out what they don't know. Does anybody know, as an example, in this high school graduating class, who were the participants in World War II? I'll take one. Dead silence. If I put a map up here, and the map was, we'll leave the United States alone for now, a map of Europe, name 5 countries. Couldn't do it. They need to know that. And one young lady asked me, why do I need to know what a map of Europe? What's the difference? I said, because we're in a global world today. And you may be doing business in that part of the world. Don't you think it'd be important for you to know about that part of the world? And it starts with a map. And she got it. And she got it. She was bilingual and wants to be in international marketing.
I mean, didn't you rush back to your schools and say, what happened to geography?
Geography, what happened to social studies? But they can do that today because it's right there available to them. Take the extra step. Be a little more inquisitive, you see.
Right.
Be a little more inquisitive. Learn more than what you are being taught, because you're going to have to. Take that extra step, and when you do, that will prepare you for that first job that you will get. That'll prepare you for that interview. Because sometimes interviews, when I get my young people in front of me, we go way off topic.
Right.
We'll talk about dog training. We'll talk about taking a trip to Iceland. You ever been to Iceland, I would say? Some will say no. Let me tell you about it. It's magnificent, by the way. It's a magnificent country. It's the only place where winter and summer come together in volcanoes and snow. It's a fascinating country. And I want to see how intelligent they are. I want to see how they can grasp a mature conversation. Sometimes we talk about raviolis. And I bring out these topics and they look at me, and some that engage, who are inquisitive, normally are the ones that I would recommend to hire. Because they engage.
Carl, I hope you're videotaping some of this to sort of send it around.
Well, actually,
schools.
we're doing, on the next session, we're going to be doing that.
I think it's a
And
good
they
idea.
found, they used to call these young children Renaissance young men and women that had,
But this applies to every child.
it applies to every child, doesn't matter.
Yes, I
Renaissance men and women, Renaissance young men and women are more apt to do well in the business world because they're able to talk to older people. And they're able to communicate better. I said to one group of boys, you don't have to like the person in the desk next to you. You have to respect them.
Right.
Not a popular
And be
word.
cordial.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
Be respectful. I
Be
always
respectful
like that.
because they're your co-workers, but you don't have to like them.
Yes.
You see. And
Now,
no one, and they found that to be very engaging.
You have, I want to change the subject here
Please.
to Picasso because
Ah.
this is so worthwhile and I need to hear the latest, what happened in England. But give us a little background on this, what
My
appeared in your
my aunts tortured me. They left me a Picasso purchased by my uncle during the war in London under a sewing machine. A 1928 Singer sewing machine. And by the way, I have the sales receipt for that sewing machine. My aunts were that good in keeping their notes. I was told in the beginning as I found it, and it said Picasso, and I realized it had a raised patina.
Yeah.
I thought it was an oil, it was not. That, well, this might be something. So I took it to my attorney. We went to Christie's, and this very nice lady by the name of Nan Grisham, you've seen her on television many times, she said it's a $20 poster. And I said, okay, I got it. It's a $20 poster. Where did it come from? Remember I saying to my high school kids, ask a question?
Right.
Well, I asked a question. Where'd it come from? It's in color. She said, what do you mean? I said, my uncle purchased it, I know that, in 1944. And he sent it to my aunt in Greenwich Village, where we lived. And color was created, was as a process, either by a company called Agricoltura, which was a German company in 1932, and processed commercially by Kodak in 1935. So this is in color. And nothing happened during the war, so that takes me back to 1939. So where did it come from? When you get a deer in the headlights look from anybody, as a news person, deer in the headlights, like blink, where'd that question come from? I knew something was up, but I couldn't prove it. It took me the better part of 14 years to prove that that $20 poster was appraised at $12 million
Oh my goodness.
and will probably sell for much more than that. With that, the learning experience that I have had, the treasure hunt, if you will, the search for the answers to how this poster got into my uncle's hands, where it came from, how and why did Picasso create it, because it's a recreation of an original work done in 1901 called Woman with a Cape, or La Jeune Fille, and it was in the Cleveland Museum. That's where it was hanging. The original, this was a recreation with a raised patina, which means it feels like an oil, but it's a print. How did he do that? And all of that long learning curve that I took me 14 years of my life. It was a treasure hunt, but more importantly, it was a learning curve. I wanted to know. And when you want to know something, sometimes it gets the best of you. There was a certain arrogance to that. My wife will tell you, but I wanted to know. So from that, we are now in the process of selling it. It has taken time. These normally do at that level in terms of sale. And that's what had me in London just recently. And then I wrote a book about that experience called Picasso Undiscovered in Blue. And the book was about the journey. More important to define for anyone what it takes to get from point A to point B in life sometimes. and all of the things that went on in my family and in the research that got me to the point. I spent 2 years looking for one word, just one word. I needed to know one word, and it took me 2 years. The Nazis got involved in this search because it was the Nazis, the Einstein Reichskeller Rosenberg, where we got Monuments Men, the movie, from, as an example, where they literally took all of the artwork of Europe and Picasso's work from his agent, Paul Rosenberg. And that story of them raiding his gallery at 21 La Bretonne in Paris led me to backwards into the story, if you will. So all of this, and now I have the Nazis involved. It's fascinating. And it was written, anyone can look on it. It's on the internet by Patricia Grumstead. Fascinating 20-year journey she took to catalog all of the Nazis' stolen art of Europe, mostly from the Jewish families.
What did you learn from that?
I learned that the Nazis are extraordinary bookkeepers. That they took most of the work and buried it in salt mines and in other museums hidden in basements. That most of the work was going to Hermann Göring. I also learned that the Nazis were doing it not so much because it was Jewish art, as they called it. They wanted it because of its value. They realized that the value of art in any kind of economic situation, and it's in writing, by the way, by a man, Rosenberg, that's why they call it the Einstein Reichskeller Rosenberg, okay? He realized that art would only have an increased value over the years, and he was absolutely correct. The value will only go up. Art value never goes down. It only continues to rise, sometimes in years more than others. It's recession and depression proof. And he knew that, and they wanted it. They wanted it for the Nazi Museum, they wanted it for Hitler, and this would be their gold mine, if you will, to preserve Nazi culture. Fascinating.
Thank you. So we've learned a lot here. First of all, it helps to be personable, and it helps to have a father who says, get a real job and prepare yourself for life. It is also luck of the draw that he had an uncle, Jackie Gleason, and sort of migrated through. But the real leitmotif, the real story on this is he's a man who creates opportunity. He's a man who thinks ahead. He talks about the next idea. That's the one that counts. And it's the profession that drives that, but it's also his what do I want to say, his who he is. He's heard it in the education. He's a solver. And you heard it in the Picasso story. Start, go from A to B, as he said, and figure out how to get there and make it happen. 14 years and not finished yet. So I encourage you to figure out where's your B in life, what's your next idea, ask the questions as he teaches in his school, his class, and be always mindful to be respectful and kind to people, which of course I like a lot, and to find, I would say, fun and meaning in what you do, and let it be vary, because what you pull into your life is the sum of your experience and what you put in there by study. So be sure you know your geography. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be a good person, do something kind for someone you know and someone you don't know, and I'll see you next week. And thank you. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you so much for having me.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadonesthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadonesthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.